Hi everyone, welcome to this podcast on colons and semicolons. This was done in the extra spelling, punctuation and grammar session. So those of you who missed it, this should be a very good revision for you. Those of you who were there, if you're unsure about anything, it'd be good to go over it again ready for your exam on June 2nd. So we looked at colons and semicolons, and as it says here, semicolons are for players. Okay, so I'll explain that comment in a little bit in a minute, but today most people, most teenagers, and hopefully I'm not giving them a disservice, tend to use them every day. This little part for separating sentences in grammar and punctuation, how it should be used, and then this big section here for making little smiley faces on their mobile phones. The only other times they tend to use them in semicolons and in their essays is when Microsoft Word probably puts a little green squiggly line under their word or under their sentence to tell them they need a semicolon there. So they right click and click it on Microsoft Word. So the idea with semicolons is that it is advanced, it's more advanced punctuation. So I've already told you if you're getting your D's and your C's, they expect you to know full stops and commas and things like that. If you want to go to the higher bands in your writing exam, you need to be using colons and semicolons. So if you use a colon or semicolon in your exam, the examiner will think this student is looking towards the higher grade. So we want to impress the examiner. Okay, so this guy here is who we're going to be talking about. So our example, our postman is called Derek. He wears a pink wig on Fridays. So these are two sentences, so 1, 2, and they're separated by a full stop. If we read them, they sound like this. Our postman is called Derek. He wears a pink wig on Fridays. So it sounds a bit boring, doesn't flow particularly well, just two sentences after each other like that. However, because the two sentences are related, they're about the same topic, we can actually get rid of the full stop and instead use for yeses, we can use a semicolon. So now we have, instead of the two boring sentences, we have, our postman is called Derek, he wears a pink wig on Fridays. So because the pink sentence and the green sentence both make sense on their own, so we can say our postman is called Derek, full stop, he wears a pink wig on Fridays. Because they both make sense, they are what we call independent clauses. Because they're about the same thing, we're talking about Derek the postman, it makes sense, so we can use a semicolon. So if it was two sentences that were totally different, with totally different topics, then you couldn't use a semicolon. And if they didn't make sense on their own, then you can't use a semicolon. So the reason, like I just said, why we don't use two sentences, it just makes your writing flow a bit better, it makes your writing seem a bit more mature, a bit more sophisticated, and just makes it a bit more high level. So things not to do with semicolons, something that the examiner will shoot you down for, is using semicolons incorrectly. So we can use semicolons, but you can't use them with conjunctions or connectives. So I've been talking about connectives ever since we've been looking at the writing. So these are words like and, because, but, yet, although, also. So you can't use a semicolon if you're using them because they're almost in place of the semicolon. They're connecting the sentence in a different way. So if you can't use a semicolon if you're going to use but or and in the middle of the sentence. So this little image again just displays that point. So don't use it with conjunctions, and then I've explained them. So my aunt's hairy knuckles are magnificent indeed, but I have no desire to stroke them. So you can use a comma in front of your connective, but you shouldn't be using a semicolon. So like it says here, a comma is used because there's a but separating the two clauses. So that's the one clause, this is the second clause. Okay, so I love Derek's wig, but I don't want to wear it. So like I've just said, we use a comma because there is a conjunction between the two sentences. So what I'd quite like to do now is perhaps pause the video and I want you to try and fill in this punctuation. So here we've got an apostrophe, we've got a semicolon, and we've got a comma. So I want you to pause this for a second and try to put in each punctuation mark. So there's two apostrophes to give you a little clue, but then there's one comma and one semicolon. So please pause the video. Okay, hopefully you've decided where each goes, so we'll go through it. Here we go. So I love Derek's pink wig, but I don't want to wear it. I prefer his orange one. So we've got I love Derek's, and because it's the possession, the pink wig belongs to Derek, we've got an apostrophe, and then we've also got an apostrophe on don't, because that's an omission, so it's leaving out the O, so instead of do not, it's don't. So I love Derek's pink wig, but because we've got but, we use the comma, but I don't want to wear it, semicolon, I prefer his orange one, because here we've got the two clauses. I love Derek's pink wig, but I don't want to wear it, one clause. I prefer his orange one, the other clause. So you could also have made that I love Derek's pink wig, but I don't want to wear it, full stop. I prefer his orange one, full stop. But this sentence just make it a bit more interesting, and you can probably see yourself how this looks better than just two simple sentences, two full stops. However, like I said before, I don't want you to overuse this. Okay, so there you go. So basically the same again. If you use them in your exam, you're on the right road to success if you use them correctly. So make sure you use them correctly. So here again, I'd like you to pause this video, and I'd like you to add a semicolon in 1 and 2, and a semicolon and a comma in 3 and 4. So please pause the video, and I will go through them in a second. Okay, so let's go through them. So Sian is Welsh. She lives in Canada. So because we've just got two clauses, two simple sentences before that, we don't have a contraction, we use the semicolon there. He likes to play video games, semicolon. He likes to read classical literature. Same again, two clauses, so you can just put it in the middle. Okay, so 3 and 4 it gets a bit trickier. You should stop drinking too much alcohol, semicolon, otherwise you're going to get into trouble. Okay, so we've got one clause there, one clause there. We use the semicolon here, and we use the comma after the contraction. So same again with this one. Hundreds of people came to the party, semicolon. Therefore, connective, it was not possible to say hello to everyone individually. So we've got the one clause, second clause, or the first sentence, you could have had a full stop, second sentence. Okay, so this was the A-Star magazine article that I showed you the other day. Thanks very much to Mr. Ruff, because this is his resource. This is the A-Star where I got you to pick out the deforest in the green highlighted. But I also want to look at the semicolons that he uses. So this is an A-Star article, like I've said. So in the first paragraph, he uses a semicolon. Andrew Bruff suggests today's youth are not the key offenders, semicolon. The elderly had the planet ruined before they even arrived. So that's just two sentences that instead of using a full stop, he's put a semicolon. And then in his final paragraph, he's put the youth today are the most educated people in the world, semicolon. Our conscience does not allow us to be wasteful. Again, just could have been two sentences, but he's put a semicolon and made it one deeper and more sophisticated sentence. But the important thing is here, I want you to notice that he's put it in the first and the last. So he's almost saying to the examiner in the first one straight away, hello, I know how to use a semicolon. And then he's done it with the reverse. So at the end, he's put it into these examiner's head as he's finished reading that he knows how to use semicolons. So it's basically straight away, I know how to do it, and then leaves the examiner with, I know how to do it. Okay, so on to colon. So this one's a little bit simpler. Okay, so a colon can be used before an explanation or an example. You can make a short statement and then expand on it. So for example, the marathon was a long race, 26 miles. Mr. Smith, colon, a person who is looking forward to half term. She finds controlled assessments dull, colon. None of the students are allowed to speak to her. Okay, so you've got a short statement and then you're going to expand on it. So, short statement, the marathon was a long race, short statement, 26 miles, expanding on it. And then the second one, which probably people are a little bit more familiar with, is it's used to introduce a list. So it is important that what comes before the colon could stand as a complete sentence on its own. So she went to the shops and bought, colon, toast, butter, eggs, crisps and jelly. So it's almost like this person's introducing their list of what's going to happen. Like I said to you a lot of times during this unit, feel free to take any notes. I'll just, if you want to just take in the video, that's fine too. Okay, so here's another example. Thanks again to Mr. Bruff. This is the A-Star version of the letter that we've seen quite a few times. So I really like this phrase. So again, this is used in the first paragraph almost to say to the examiner, I know what I'm doing with this punctuation. 7 marks out of 20, get me out of those bands to the higher bands with the punctuation. So I really like this phrase. So I will get straight to the point, colon, I am writing today to ask you to consider the abolishment of school uniform. So there's a point, I will get straight to the point, and he expands on it with, I'm writing today, blah, blah, blah. It's almost, like I said, showing to the examiner you know what you're doing. So I'd really like you to maybe try to even remember this phrase. This would be a really great phrase to use in the latter part of your first paragraph of a letter or a speech. Okay, I have said to you 100 times before, I don't want you to start with the first line, I'm writing to you or I'm speaking to you. However, if you do a bit of an interesting start and then your final line of your first paragraph, I will get straight to the point, colon. I think that would be really good. Another thing I quickly talked about the other day was changing up your sentences a little bit. So instead of using a or the or my or any other sort of boring sentence starters, I want you to try to make them interesting, and there's a few ways you can do this. So one way you could do this is using two adjectives, okay? So which describe the subject of what you're going to say. So instead of just saying Mr. Bruff's ebook was a worldwide bestseller, if you use two adjectives, informative and entertaining, comma, Mr. Bruff's ebook was a worldwide bestseller. So it just transforms the sentence, makes it a bit more interesting, shows the examiner that you're a little bit more confident with your writing. Another example, exhausted and frustrated. The students finally finished their GCSE exams, which hopefully that's the sort of feeling, well, exhausted anyway, that you'll be feeling on June the 2nd. Another thing you can do is start with an ing or ing word. So example, straining with the effort, comma, did a backflip. So another example could be, annoyingly, he had got the date for his exam wrong. Something like that, ing. Another one that I've talked about a few times is beginning the sentence or the beginning of the paragraph with a word that ends in ly. So for example, happily, Mr. Bruff wrote 15,000 word revision guide. So it just makes all these three topics, so two adjective beginnings, finishing with ing, finishing with an ly, all these things just make it a little bit more interesting for the reader, shows the examiner you're confident that you are at the higher level of writing. Okay, so here's another example. So this one is quite sort of a boring text at the moment. In a recent article, the writer argued that her makeup and make-do generation knew something about how to save the environment. Of course, what she failed to mention was they were make-do and mending in the first place, colon. World War II. Oh yes, whilst Grandma was washing her tinfoil, Grandad was being shipped off to Poland, destroying natural landscapes with tanks, clogging up the Polish air with fuel emissions from the machinery of war, not to mention the killing. Okay, so that's a boring one. So adding those sentence variety that we've been talking about. So we're here, we started with disillusioned and despondent, curiously ending in ly, hoping ending in ing. Yeah, all these things just make it a lot more interesting. So if you can, I'm not saying every single sentence try to use one, but if you maybe sort of 6 or 7 times during the whole thing, that would be really good. So that's the end of our video on how to use a semicolon. Hopefully it's helped you. A lot of people do find it a bit of a scary thing here, like it says the most feared punctuation on earth. But once you get the hang of it, it's actually very simple, but it actually could take your grades up if you get it correct, and hopefully this video has helped you do that. Thanks very much.